Hi, and welcome to the DNX podcast. My name is Sylvia Chrisman. I am your host, and I'm here today with Giovanna Capozza. She is the podcast host of She Rises and a coach, and I'm so excited that you have time for us today, and I can't wait to hear your story. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to dive in.
Yeah, tell us, please. How did you get started coaching, and what is your focus, and what is the She Rises podcast?
Cool. Thank you. Well, I'll try and be brief, but my past life, let's say, I was an alternative medicine doctor, and I had a clinical practice in Toronto, Canada, where I'm originally from, and I did that for nearly 8 years. And I was doing coaching involved with that, and as well as being a clinician and all that comes with that. And I reached a place where, it's a very common term, we all know it, the burnout place. I got to a place where I had checked all the so-called boxes in my life, but I had to stop and look around and realize I wasn't happy. I wasn't fulfilled. There was something missing with my business. I didn't know where it was. And I was going through personal crisis in my life, and I decided that I was going to get away from it all. So I packed up and I put all my stuff in storage, and I moved to Mexico for what was supposed to be a year sabbatical and turned into a 5-year journey around the world, basically. But I had to take some time out. I had to reassess. And in that time, I realized that the coaching and personal development piece had been around, it's well over 20 years now that I've been in spiritual development for myself. And I wanted to take that piece and I wanted to create change with that piece. I didn't want to look at blood results anymore and prescribe and, do all that stuff. It felt like it was just being singular in that. And I wasn't bringing in this other spiritual personal development side. So what's happened now is I bring all aspects of that into the work that I do and the business coaching and relationship work I do with women. And it's been a beautiful marriage, but it's taken a little while to get there. It took a lot of soul searching and a lot of digging through the weeds to find out what it was and how I was going to bring all these elements together.
That's beautiful. So, what do you focus on the She Rises podcast?
Well, She Rises is interesting. So I was getting this nudge to start a podcast about a year before I actually started it. And I was sort of like, I'm a great at speaking. I love teaching. I love doing all that stuff. But I was like, who wants to hear me talk like all the time, right? Like I had this kind of thing going on. So I delayed it for about a year. And I was sitting down and I was actually back in Mexico, believe it or not. I was back there and I was just reassessing, like, where is this all going? And this whisper started coming back. And now this time it wasn't a whisper, it was quite strong. And what I got was that I wanted to create this podcast, and the She Rises, the she, people are always like, well, who's the she? Like, what does that mean? The She Rises, this is she with a capital S. It's your spirit. It's your inner spirit. It's your soul, if you want to call it that. It's that aspect of you that is continually rising. It's never fallen away. It's always existed. And often what happens is life and our overachievingness that we have and our highly motivated women that listen to the podcast, we can lose sight of that. We can lose track of that. And so we have these moments in our lives where, just like the phoenix, we get burnt down, we burn it all up, we burn up all the old, and we rise from the ashes. And so the podcast is dedicated to that woman who is constantly rising from the ashes, who is constantly reinventing, but who's also searching for that she, right? With the capital S, that inner spirit, that inner soul. So it really came through strongly as something I had to put together. And I'm honored because I don't have to talk about myself all the time, which is great. I get to interview amazing guests like you. I had you on the podcast just the other day. We did an interview.
Thank you.
And I get to talk to these amazing women and men about these topics that are, life enhancing for everyone that's listening. The audience is mainly women because, of course, the name, but I do have a lot of men that listen as well. So yeah, that's She Rises. That's what that's about.
It's beautiful. That just gave me chills. There was definitely a time in my life where I was going through a lot of physical issues, I would say. My adrenals weren't working, and it was such a it was a physical manifestation of, not being aligned on my path. And my acupuncturist started doing the Phoenix Rising treatments, which was the number one thing that really got me back up and out into the world and allowed my body to heal itself, which was beautiful. So when I hear that idea around the Phoenix Rising, that's really, really powerful, I think, to me.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So what do you focus on at the moment? Like what's next for you? What's on the horizon?
Thank you for asking. So right now, it's funny that this is my morning of interviews, and I've just been talking about this particular topic nonstop because I love it. I could talk about it forever. One of the things that I'm doing right now is I've developed a program for women in business around the archetype of the witch. And I'm focusing on, I use a lot of archetypes in my work. I find them really useful. Back in the day, the first sort of creator and proponent of archetypes was Carl Jung, and it's evolved from there, and people have taken archetypes and archetype work into their own realms. And I particularly love the archetype of the witch for women, and in particular, women in business, highly motivated women. And so right? So I'm using her and the dark and the light and all the aspects of her and bringing also a little bit of that magic in. So when I say that it took me a little while to sort of encompass all the stuff that I do into one thing, this is really the manifestation of that, so we're going to be looking at the power of ritual. So we're going to be working around the moon cycle. We're also going to be looking at the biological cycle of a woman. And, people listening.
Isn't that the same thing?
Yeah, right. Thank you. So yes, the moon as a heavenly body, and then our heavenly bodies. Absolutely. So it's funny, like I'm just having these conversations all morning, and people listening might think, well, what does that have to do with business? And it has everything to do with business. Everything. Because as a woman, we can't compartmentalize our relationships and our bodies and our business and have them be all these three separate entities. We are the business. We are in the relationship. Like all of us is either showing up or not. And to whatever degree that that's happening or not, directly reflects the bottom line. It directly reflects the boardroom. It directly reflects all these different aspects. And so the archetype of the witch is this really powerful, beautiful tool to work with that I have found really brings a woman into her sovereignty, whether it's financial sovereignty in her life, her own power, her voice, her visibility. So that's really exciting me now.
Yeah, that's exciting me too. I think because it's so hugely relevant. It's I couldn't agree with you more, and it's so beautiful that you're bringing that out into the world because it's 100% correct. We cannot compartmentalize, as in the way that it's often asked of us in the world and the construct of the world today, which is why it's so much harder for women. So if women learn how to embrace that differently and wholeheartedly take all of themselves into the world, abundance will follow.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. She's the ultimate feminist. That's what I call her.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Yeah. And she's also the ultimate healer and, really powerful manifestor and creator in this world.
Yeah, absolutely. I've loved that archetype for forever, since I was a small child.
So, tell me, what are the other archetypes? Not just the witch. What are other archetypes people can look into?
Yeah, there's so many. So if you actually, this could be a series of conversations, but if you're listening and you Google Carl Jung came up with his main archetypes. I don't remember them all at this moment. And then they've evolved from there. So a lot of archetypes for the women, and these will ring true to some people listening. Some of the main ones besides witch are the prostitute, the mother, the crone. Those are sort of the main ones that come up. The lover, right? The lover is also an archetype. So those are a lot of the ones that come up for women. The reason that I sort of go to the witch is because I find that she can encompass all of those. But those are sort of the main ones. And, I sometimes when I share this with women or I'm talking to groups and I say the prostitute one and they're all like, oh, what? Like they're all sort of like appalled, but there's many ways that we can fall into that archetype. There's many ways that we are, sort of selling ourselves or selling out in order to get something, in order to stay safe in a relationship, in order to stay safe in a career, even. We prostitute ourselves in those ways. And when you break it down for people that way, they start to go, oh, like I get that sort of sigh of like, oh God, I'm doing that, like crap, you know? Yeah. And so they're useful tools, not as a way to sort of judge ourselves and like, oh God, I'm being such a prostitute today. You know, it's not a way to judge ourselves. It's a way to see like, how are we showing up? And why are we showing up like this? Because there's a payoff to everything, right? There's a payoff to the prostitute is kind of an easy one to look at, right? Because there's a payoff to that. You're getting something out of selling yourself, right? It's just sort of an entrepreneur, a woman's entrepreneur venture as old as time, right? As being the prostitute, but you're selling out, you're selling something, right? So
it is the oldest profession in the world.
Oldest profession in the world. So, but we all do that. Like we can all prostitute ourselves in certain ways as women. It's the place where we lose our power, place where we don't stand in our leadership. So I find that's a really powerful one to look at.
Yeah, I mean that one really resonates with me, and there's so many components and layers to it too, because for generations, you know, women that was, you know, the aspect of prostituting yourself in some way, shape, or form was the only thing women had to actually leverage, right? Whether that was into the construct of marriage, to marry one family to another, where you were handed from one man into the possession of another man, and the only leverage within that context was some sort of form of, you know, prostituting, which comes with manipulation and often lack of integrity to secure your own security and place in this world.
Absolutely.
Right?
And there's aspects of us that still do that still show up that way.
Oh, yeah. 100%. I mean, a lot of it is also tied to, you know, policies and politics and laws not really being regulated that would give many women in many countries and places in this world other options at this time, you know?
Absolutely. And that's really important to state that, because that's where, you know, again, this isn't about judging, right? This isn't about judging yourself or even others for going into that, because there's very real reasons why we would fall into that archetype. There's also ways that we could start to identify, and once we see it, like once you see something, you can never unsee it, right? And that's when you get the opportunity to work with it.
Yeah, and it's as real as people joking about the fact that they went to university to get an MRS degree, right? And but what is it really? You know, like, haha, that's funny. You went to university to get an Ivy League degree and find a husband, but yes, you are prostituting parts of yourself, and you're giving something of yourself, and sometimes the imbalance and, you know, may catch up with you. It's not a joke. It's not a judgment, but, you know, if it catches up with you, be aware and make changes accordingly, right?
Yeah, great insight. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, this is a topic I could talk about forever. I was just looking actually at the ego types. Who's the hero archetype?
Oh, the hero could show up in many different ways. I can't, or, you know, in our case, speaking about women, the heroine, the hero archetype or the heroine archetypes on let's say the maybe unhealthy end of it, right, can show up as I will take care of everything. I will do everything. I will, you know, just rely on me, right? I'll come in and save the day. This shows up for a lot of leaders in business because this is where you talk about someone bottlenecking in their business, right? Yeah. Because they've got everything under control and they're the hero. And if there's someone, you know, like a staff member or a team member that is struggling somehow, rather than, you know, maybe support and nurture leadership with that person, that archetype comes in and sort of saves the day. What ends up happening though is that archetype, when you're showing up that way all the time as the hero coming in, like the white, you know, the white knight, so to speak, you burn out, right? You can't do everything and you can't be everything to all people. You also start to develop one-sided kind of toxic relationships where everyone's just always relying on you. And, you know, you look at the hero in books, they're very often, they're not being rescued. They are the rescuer. So that's how that can show up on the sort of unhealthy side of things. On the healthier side of things, you know, the hero, we look at Joseph Campbell and the heroine's journey, or the hero's journey and the heroine's journey. we look at that, like that deep going on an inner quest to find yourself, to improve yourself. That's where we could look at the hero as showing up in a healthier sort of way in life.
Yes. Beautiful. Really, really beautiful. So how did you get, what was your initial fascination with the archetypes? I remember years and years and years ago, I read a book called The Mist of Avalon. Have you ever read that?
Oh, my favorite book of all times. Oh, I love that book.
I knew it.
Of course you did. That's that witchy part of you, see?
Right. Yes. It's like, I'm sure you read the book. So, that to me was sort of the first time I was like, oh, wow. There's so much out there that I need to really bring into this world and facilitate, different perspectives for people that I find are much needed in this world. Right. So talk to me about sort of women in leadership positions and changes that you see in the world today through the work that you bring into this world.
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's a big question too. So it's like, let me think about that. Well, I mean, let's just go back to the book. I mean, going to that book, and for those of you that haven't read it, please do yourself the favor of reading it. Basically, essentially, The Mist of Avalon is the story of the women behind the man, right? It's the story of the women behind King Arthur and that whole legend of King Arthur. It's the story that's not really ever told, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And their connectivity to spirit and to the earth and to ritual and to themselves. And how they brought that actually, and how that bringing that to the world not only empowered themselves, but empowered the patriarchy of the time, i.e. King Arthur and his court. Mm-hmm. So it's an amazing, amazing book. If we look at that now and we look at women in leadership, I mean, my own leadership journey as a woman is still evolving. I was just on the phone with a coach friend of mine yesterday who brought this amazing insight to me around places where I'm still seeking permission. Places where I'm still seeking permission to show up, and in seeking permission, as women, we abdicate the throne, right? We're no longer on the throne.
Right.
So there's so many ways in which, we could work with these. And you asked initially about where, how I first started working with them and discovered them. Not so much from reading the book, The Mists of Avalon, but for me, I was introduced to them through the work of Carolyn Mace.
Yeah.
And she talks about, she has one book, Sacred Contracts. And I think that's the book where she goes into the archetypes. And then she has a bunch of other beautiful pieces of work where she talks about archetypes. Yeah. That's where I first started to dive into the work of archetypes and shadow work and learning about, this other aspect of us. I think what's important for women in leadership today is to start to bring back the aspect of woman and self, whose power lies in that connection to our feminine self. We hear a lot of our people in the industry talking about the divine feminine or the sacred feminine, and we can take that into the airy fairy, or we can take it into the real practical. Where have we lost our connection to our deep inner self as woman, right? Not as I have to be a woman living in a man's world and in the patriarchy, and I have to push and go and like literally, like there's all these diseases women are having now that we, chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia and all these things. That this is a result of us just living too much in that energy.
Yes, 100%.
So
that's what happened to me. Yeah.
Me too, right? Me too. And like adrenal fatigue and like, good Lord, I can just go on and on with
but
it
it does show up in the adrenals, right? Hormonal imbalances, adrenals, and chronic exhaustion.
Yeah. And it shows up in all the women's illnesses too, right? If we go on neglecting our womanhood, right? Like that essential energy that is woman. And again, read the book, Mists of Avalon. But if we go on denying her, right? In the book, they call her the goddess, right? If we go on denying the goddess, right? And how she shows up in ourselves and how she shows up in our work and in the world, we are in turn not showing up as powerful leaders or as powerful as we could be. And so, I mean, I can just Like I'm going to go off on a tangent, but I mean, that is really the place where I think in leadership, and you asked about how women, showing up in the archetypes, that's the place. If we start to work with that, what would the world look like? What would the world be? What could your just business be, and your community and your family and your relationships be like if we embraced her more, if we became her? If we saw that there was no separation between the her with a capital H and us. Yeah. And so you can hear that I can just keep going.
Well,
but
I'm fascinated
to be respectful of
and
your
I'm sure
time.
everybody else is too. Yes. Because I think it's such a much needed message in this world. And, it's so important to really talk about it because, women are on the rise, and supporting women to talk to them about how to rise with wholeheartedly and with that in mind, without trying to adjust themselves to the man's world and losing their femininity along the way is so massively important.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Well, we're at the end of our time. So thank you so much, Giovanna, for making the time. I appreciate it. We're actually going to put all of these links and resources below the podcast so you can, find the Mists of Avalon and learn about this and the Carl Jung 12 archetypes and, where can people find you?
They can find me by going to my website, which is sherisespodcast.com. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook, the good old social sites. And you can email me if you need any more information at info@giovannacapozza.com, or you can find me on social. I find people find me everywhere, but those are the main places that you can look for me. And of course, email us through the website as well.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for sharing your wisdom.
Thank you for having me. It was so much fun.
That's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your ongoing support. Before I leave you, I want to invite you into my world. Please go check out dnxcommunity.com. This is where you'll find the other nomads and evaders of convention. We'll see you there. And if you're interested in our English-speaking events, go and check out dnxglobal.com. You'll find the link below this podcast as well. And if you have time, one last favor, please go to iTunes, look for Sylvia Christman or look for the DNX podcast and leave a review. Thank you so much, lovely people, and I'll talk to you next time.